It's Friday. Hey guys, welcome to another episode. AKP Sports Talk. Favorite two, you know who it is. Ari Korea. Ari, first off, how's your Friday going?
It's going very well. Nice weather out here in Tucson. Obviously, yesterday was a great day for all of us baseball fans, and we'll get right into that.
You might as well. The day has finally come. We can finally say no more lockout nonsense. The MLB and the MLBPA finally reached an agreement yesterday afternoon. It took a long time. It was a long, windy road. We finally got here. We are going to have opening day, April 7th, full 162 game schedule, universal DH, some of the big things in the CBA that's coming up. This has pretty much been one of the days that we've been waiting for since February, since mid-February, and now it's March 10th. Well, it was March 10th, but it's March 11th now. We now know we have an opening day. We now know that the CBA was agreed on by both parties. So, Ari, how are you feeling? I know this is big news for us, but in terms of finally getting stuff back on track, was this just something waiting to happen, or was this something at the last? I saw what was it, a tweet talking about the 2 yard line, and I got some flashbacks. But how do you feel now?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about it for a while, like the last few weeks. That at some point, both sides are going to both lose too much money to the point where they have to come to an agreement at some point. And yeah, I don't know. It seems like both parties were happy. I was like refreshing every 5 minutes after that 2 yard line tweet because it just seemed like it's only a matter of time. And within like a couple hours after that tweet is when it was official. And yeah, it's just I have the primary changes that are being adopted, I believe, for immediately this upcoming season. You mentioned the universal DH, which I like a lot. Expanding the playoffs to 12 teams, limiting the number of time a player can be optioned to the minor leagues in one season, a draft lottery, and then the draft pick inducements to kind of discourage the service time manipulation. And then I believe that the other part was saving time. I think it's 2023 is when they're gonna have like they're gonna ban the shift. And then I think like make the bases larger, I think was one of them. Then there's like one more change for 2023, but the change that I like a lot for 2023 is the schedule change where every team plays every team at least once each year. Obviously, a lot of the AL and NL teams don't really play each other much, maybe like once every few years. So yeah, we see this in NBA obviously with every team playing every team at least once. So like at some point, like facing your division rivals 20 times a year gets kind of old. So I think that this will definitely be refreshing to for your favorite team to face other teams that you normally wouldn't face. And then obviously now with the universal DH, it won't matter AL, NL, whatever. It won't matter with the park here, and obviously because pitchers won't bat anymore. And yeah, we've seen a few free agent signings. Tonight, I think Carlos Rodon's probably the biggest name that's gone off the board to the Giants. Andrelton Simmons to the Cubs. And yeah, obviously, I think it seems like we're pretty close to a number of other top free agents going to be off the board in some trades as well.
Yeah, you mentioned pretty much all of the background behind this new CBA agreement with just all the different stipulations and stuff. One of my favorite things is that new playoff format. That's something I've been hammering for since like 2015 because back then the Mariners were that one team out, and if there was a better playoff system instead of this 5-team nonsense, it would be actually more inviting. But when they had that 8-team for each league in 2020, I was not a fan of that at all because it was just too many. It was basically guaranteed that over 50% of the league was making the playoffs. So I'm like, well, there's no competitive effort to it. Like you can go 500 and you'll be a playoff team. But now this 6-team format is very beneficial. I like it a lot more. You mentioned some of the big names taken off the board, Rodon along with Simmons. I saw that Clayton Kershaw is probably coming back to LA. That was kind of expected. I know the Dodgers and Yankees have been pretty much pursuing Freddie Freeman. You also mentioned the Yankees linked to Carlos Correa, Chris Bryant linked to the Mariners and the Phillies, and there's just so much now. We finally get that craziness that we were waiting for, or that we got a little bit of back in December on that crazy time when guys like Robbie Ray were coming to Seattle and just all this movement that was happening before the lockout happened. Now we finally get that. I'm excited to see all the movement. You mentioned just all the new things. Universal DH. That's something that I think is good. Obviously, I'm going to miss pitchers hitting. There's some pitchers who actually can rake. Guys like Madison Bumgarner, Bartolo Colon, those guys, they can hit the ball well, but I prefer universal DH. It actually makes the game more even. Not these weird stipulations that the NL, players, pitchers had. I thought that was stupid anyway, but I mean, it had to be all or nothing. So I would have clamored for either all pitchers in both leagues hit or just universal DH. And universal DH was pretty much one of the easier one out of the two. And so now it makes things interesting because now you have teams like the Cardinals who are pursuing Albert Pujols for a DH position. And you would think, well, why would the Cardinals? But now there's universal DH. So that's something that's a good side effect of that as well. I mean, baseball's back. Baseball's finally back. I'm glad that we finally got to this point where it was just no more speculation and no more, when are we going to start? No, we are officially starting April 7th. Spring training is starting pretty much next week. And speaking about Freddie Freeman, this just came out right now. Dodgers are just they made an offer to Freeman. Apparently it's a multi-year deal. So obviously Freddie Freeman is pretty much one of the hottest commodities right now on that free agent market, potentially going to the Dodgers if he accepts this big deal, and they're making a strong push for him. So the Dodgers, just trying to make themselves more like the Lakers, just bringing all these stars into LA. But, it's a good thing that baseball's back. This is America's sport. This is pretty much the backbone of why people love this sport. One of the things I also did see in the CBA that didn't really get pointed out, but something is kind of interesting. In the All-Star game, instead of just going to more extra innings, they're going to do a second home run derby. And I think that's actually pretty interesting because instead of, yes, the All-Star game is fun sometimes if it's competitive, or like last year when we had Shohei Ohtani both pitch and hit in the same game. That was amazing. But this home run derby, everyone loves the home run derby. That's pretty much one of the bigger skills events for the All-Star game for baseball in July. Everyone loves the home run derby. People hitting bombs. What else is new? But I think this home run derby, kind of brings a little more competition to the game. So, but in all fairness, I mean, I'm glad this agreement finally got reached. We've been talking about this agreement for weeks now, and all these meetings and all this speculation on when the season starts. That's pretty much gone to rest now. We finally have a season start date, April 7th. I believe the Mariners' first home series will be April 15th, which is the week after. We have obviously universal DH, postseason expanded, and the playoff format is top two teams from each league get the byes, and then we have 3, 6, 4, 5 from each league. And yeah, it makes it more interesting. It makes baseball a little more attractive, and and finally, it kind of seems like Rob Manfred actually grew a brain, because at his last press conference, he was saying like baseball is finally back, and actually making it seem like he wanted to support the people instead of the first one where when he was canceling the games and all that nonsense. But we finally made it to this point. I'm glad I get to Costco now and get my Mariners season tickets now that the season is not in question. But we're finally glad we got to this point. This has been pretty much one of the biggest things this year. Just the constant back and forth between the Players Association along with MLB and the front office with Manfred and all of them and the owners. But we finally reached this point where we don't have to think anymore. Obviously, everyone in the baseball community is rejoicing off of this. You saw tweets from pretty much everyone on the Mariners roster, let alone just everyone in the Major League Baseball Association and all that stuff, and the fans as well. That's the best part of it. All of us came together. We were all happy. Everyone was rejoicing. Finally, baseball is saved again. Baseball is back. So that's pretty much something to look forward to now as well, since spring training literally starts next week. So obviously, pitchers and catchers will already be reporting. So it's going to be a little bit of a speedy process. And speaking of speedy process, that's why free agency is going to be pretty much booming this next week due to just the kind of, not elongated time the usual offseason is. This offseason was like 1 month and then a walkout and then 3 weeks and then bam, we're into the regular season. So all these signings are probably going to be coming in next week. We'll keep you updated with every single signing, every single big one from every single team. But we are finally reached a time where we can actually talk about who's going where with MLB. And it's just exciting. Ari, any last thoughts about the MLB and the MLB PA finally getting to this point where we don't have to speculate anymore?
No, yeah, like you said, I think today was the start of players going to spring training, and I think it's Sunday, I believe, is like the mandatory reporting day for spring training. So, and there's like a number of players still free agents, and they don't, the longer they wait to sign, the less time they'll have to prepare for the season. So I think in the next few days, we should see a flurry of signings. I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen more. Like I think it was like 7 Eastern was when it opened up yesterday. I thought we were going to see like a few last night, but we really didn't see any. And then we've seen a handful today, but I assume over the weekend and into early next week, we should see a huge flurry of signings come out.
Yeah, and I think one of them may be Freddie Freeman, because I'm seeing from John Morosi on Twitter that talks with Freddie Freeman and the Dodgers are pretty much intensifying. So maybe we're going to get one of our first big ones tonight, as Freddie Freeman has been pretty much linked with the Dodgers ever since the beginning of the offseason, along with the Yankees, and potentially returning to that World Series team in Atlanta. But it looks like Freddie Freeman may be on the move. We'll see.
Wow.
We'll see how that folds out in the later hours. You also mentioned it. I'm a little surprised that I haven't seen that much, big news like bam, like we've seen some trickles with Carlos Rodon and Andrelton Simmons and Clayton Kershaw now returning back to LA, but nothing too big like the Carlos Correas or the Chris Bryants or whatever. We haven't seen anything too big recently, so I'm kind of excited to see what happens there as the days can continue on. And you mentioned it, the start of the season is not getting any close. It's getting closer and closer, and the more these free agents wait, the less time they have to get ready for their new teams or old teams, depending on where they go. And, less time, actually getting that practice in a real setting in in Peoria, Arizona, potentially, or down in Florida. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. But now we're going to transition into something that's right around the corner, college basketball. Obviously March Madness starts in a week, literally less than a week, 6 days. Selection show is 2 days away. We've had some pretty much big surprises throughout this week of conference tournament play. You mentioned Indiana. They got 2 wins, and now they're pretty much a little more safer on the other side of the bubble instead of teams like Xavier and Wake Forest, who lost their first games to bad opponents like Butler in overtime. And mind you, both of them had leads, and they just blew them. So first question, Ari, where do you see Xavier and Wake Forest fitting in that bubble right now after Xavier lost in overtime to Butler on Wednesday and Wake Forest lost in overtime to Boston College? Where do you see these two teams right now in the bubble?
Yeah, I feel like, because I want to say Wake Forest I want to say Lunardi had them on the first 4 out. Am I wrong? I think that's where he had them. So
yeah, they're somewhere around there. Last team in, first team out. They're right around there.
So I feel like Wake Forest is going to need a lot of help. That was definitely a pretty ugly loss, I feel like, for them, just given how much of a win that they needed. But credit to Boston College for pulling that out, and then they lost on the heartbreaker to Miami on the last second layup. I think it was yesterday now. And then I feel like Xavier, they shot like horribly from the free throw line, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't know. I think that they should still make the tournament, to my understanding, but definitely not heading in with the momentum that they probably would have hoped for.
Yeah, you mentioned those two games. Very bad loss for both programs. And then you have teams like Dayton, who literally just won their game today. So Dayton is now moving on to the second round. And that team's like one of the first teams out. So you see a team like Dayton who are actually winning games in their conference versus a team like Wake Forest who is done after their first game. It really puts things into perspective, like whether it's not who's a tournament team and who's not. It's probably going to come down to Sunday, honestly, with teams like SMU and all those Sunday championship games, depending on how far each team gets. One of the big games yesterday, though, was Michigan-Indiana. That was a crazy game. Michigan got out to a huge lead. They were up by 17 with 11 minutes left, and then all of a sudden, Indiana just came up coming. They went on a 31-9 run to end the game. Indiana won. That's crazy.
It was like 28-2, right? For like before, and then Michigan scored a couple points like super late. But yeah,
it was crazy. 31-9 run for Indiana. They wanted it more. I mean, it was just more of a battle of who wanted to be in the tournament more. Was it Michigan, who was safe, but a win would actually kind of clinch them as somewhat of a lock, or Indiana, who needed those, not just one, but a big win today against Illinois. Shout out to Indiana, big wins. Now they're a little more safer as one of the last teams in, and a big win against Illinois, top team in the conference, and bam, now you're in. So, all right, what are your thoughts about that Michigan-Indiana game yesterday? Was this just great Indiana coming down the stretch, or was this horrible Michigan? After Juwan Howard's first game after suspension, it seemed like there was a lot of rust there. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the first half Michigan dominated, and up until I want to say it was like the 12-minute mark of the second half or something when they started to fall apart, or 10-minute mark, something like that. But yeah, I definitely think that Michigan lost that game and they didn't win that game. But props to them. I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but they pulled the upset today. So props to Indiana, and I think with these two wins, I feel like they're for the most part pretty safe in the 64 or 68 teams in.
Yeah, definitely. That big win today against Illinois really was kind of the key win for them. They needed at least 1 to 2 wins to put them back in that bubble talk. They've always been on the outside looking in for the past week and a half, but 2 big wins, and now, bam, they're in. So great job for Indy. Obviously, Michigan, they had a very controversial ending to their regular season with Juwan Howard being suspended, 3 players on Michigan being suspended for games due to the huge brawl that we already talked about between Michigan and Wisconsin. But it seemed like Michigan, dominating the first half. It seemed like Michigan was just going to roll through it, and Indiana was just dead alive. And, Indiana was just not going to be a team, and they were destined to go to the NIT. But then Mike Woodson, first year head coach, first time in NCAA, went down, gritty wins against Michigan and Illinois in your conference, especially in the tournament, seeing how, the inconsistencies have fallen off now. So shout out to the University of Indiana. That's a big win. One of the big things from yesterday that was actually pretty intriguing to me was to see Baylor go down so early. Baylor lost yesterday to number 7 Oklahoma in the quarterfinals of the Big 12 tournament. Baylor just did not look good at all. They just looked like their rhythm was off. Already, you got the chance to watch that, and what does this mean? Is Baylor kind of just already eliminated from being a number 1 seed, especially losing in your first game in the postseason tournament? And what does it mean for Oklahoma? Are they back into the tournament talks? Are they back into that bubble? They've been always around that bubble heading into down the stretch, but then a bunch of losses took them out. But one big win against Baylor, and now they're in. Does Oklahoma have a good shot of making it in? And what about Baylor? What is Baylor looking like right now?
Yeah, I think Baylor is definitely eliminated from number 1 seed at this point. I think they're going to be a number 2 seed. I didn't get to watch the entire game, but I mean, this is 6 losses I think for them this year. So they've been, inconsistency has hurt them this year. As for Oklahoma, I don't know. I feel like they play Texas Tech tonight. I feel like they're going to have to pull off another big upset to really feel safe, and to make it into the tournament. I feel like there's a slight chance that they could sneak in even with the loss tonight, but it seems pretty far-fetched just based off my understanding.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Oklahoma, they've had a up and down all around season under first year head coach. Forgot his last name, but Porter out of Loyola Chicago. First year coming into the big conference, the Big 12. You have a mediocre season. You bring in some big transfers like Tanner Groves out of Eastern. You have that up and down season, and then finally get a big win when it really matters. It keeps them alive. They got a pulse, but Oklahoma, they do got a big challenge. They got to play Texas Tech. Texas Tech is a very good team, very good defensively, gritty offense. So that game starts at 6:30 Pacific time, so about an hour now. That's going to be something to keep forward to as we head into the night. But, we're getting closer and closer to that Sunday deadline. March Madness, the selection show will be at 3 p.m. on Saturday. That's going to be one of the most interesting talks pretty much of the weekend, considering so many bubble teams and all of that. So, all right now, who are your last four in? If you had to give right now endings as of right now, who are your last four teams into the tournament?
And then do a little research. You give yours first.
All right, I'll give mine first. So mine right now, I definitely would lean a little bit more toward Michigan. Michigan right now, I'd say they're at the top right now. That crucial loss to Indiana in the first round was not just bad, but pretty much demoralizing. I mean, you go on a 31. You let your opponent go on a 31-9 run. You don't even get 10 points in an 11-minute stretch. That just shows you how the inconsistencies for Michigan are really going to affect them. I think they're one of the last teams in. I believe Xavier is as well. The Musketeers, obviously, really bad game against Butler in the first round on Wednesday. Bad loss for them in overtime. I also think Wake Forest is on there too. I mean, they're a good team. They're 23-9. They have a good record in that conference, but just one bad game and you lose to a 13 seed in the 13 ranked team in your conference, pretty much bottom of the barrel as it gets, and you lose in overtime, and it just doesn't show that that this team is really in it. The inconsistencies are always going to be there, and obviously one of my last teams in is definitely Indiana. Indiana, obviously, crazy run that they're going on right now. Winning. We talked about it, or we just talked about it, beating Michigan and then beating Illinois today. Now they're set up in the semis against Iowa tomorrow. And the way this Indiana team is playing, they may play themselves to the AQ if they keep this up, depending on what happens at the bottom of the bracket for the big tournament. But right now, I'd say, in that order, I'd go Michigan at the top. They're safe, but, bubble talks, anything could happen. I'd say Xavier and Wake Forest are on the decline, and I'd say Indiana is now moving in because of their two big wins yesterday and this morning.
Okay, so I don't really have like a set four, but I'll just talk about a handful of teams that I think are kind of in that range. I would say at the top, I think they're pretty safe in, but I don't know. I feel like if Wyoming loses to Boise State tonight, I feel like they're kind of like on that cusp where I think they'll still be in, but they're kind of like the top of the last four in. So there's like a small chance if they lose tonight I think it's Boise State tonight they play, that they might not make it, but a win tonight over Boise State will make them safe. You talked about Indiana and Xavier, Wake Forest. I agree that those three are kind of in that range. I think if Virginia Tech can beat North Carolina tonight, they can kind of find that range. I know I was looking at Joe Lunardi. He has them as first four out right now, but I assume that he'll have them in that last four, and if they beat UNC tonight. So they're kind of in that range, and I think you mentioned Dayton earlier. If they keep winning, if they can win one more game, they can find themselves in that range. So there's definitely, I would say, like 5 to 10 teams that could still find their way in that last four in. Between currently the last four who are the last four buys who are already in, the last four in, and the first four, I feel like all 12 of them could, depending on how they do in their conference tournaments and how other teams do. If there's some like bid stealers in smaller conferences where they have, 2 bids or whatever, that could definitely shake it up. But yeah, that's what I have right now.
Yeah, of course. And, we're about less than 2 days away from Selection Show Sunday. We will try and get you that live stream on Sunday at 3 o'clock Pacific time. We'll be, giving our live reactions to how the bracket is formatted with all the AQs, last four in, first four out, all that fun jazz. That'll be on Sunday at 3. But finally, I want to get into some football real quick. Obviously, one of the biggest news of the day, Deshaun Watson now being exonerated pretty much. No charges. He will not be doing any jail time. He will now is kind of open to the market. So, this is pretty much one of the big decisions with the offseason revolving around Deshaun Watson and the trade market for him, because obviously we've been knowing that he wants out of Houston for a little while. And, there's that disgruntled relationship with the front office and Deshaun. Deshaun wants to be traded, but a lot of teams were nervous, obviously due to his ongoing investigation. Now that's closed, and pretty much the bidding war for Deshaun Watson is pretty much opened. Ari, where do you see him? Pretty much, where are your three teams that kind of see him? I know obviously we talked about the Seahawks maybe trying to get after him. Obviously the Panthers, bringing that home back to Carolina. Obviously Deshaun played at Clemson back in his college days. And obviously the Commanders were linked to him before they got Carson Wentz on Wednesday in that big trade, big trade with the Colts on Wednesday. Ari, where do you see Deshaun Watson potentially ending up now that he's not a guilty man?
Yeah, if I had to, I guess, rank my top 3 potential destinations, I'd say 1 is Pittsburgh. Obviously, with the loss of Roethlisberger, also they have that huge hole, and they're still, a team that can win now with the really good quarterback, and they've been in the market for him. So I'd say 1, Pittsburgh. I'm saying 2 is the Seahawks if they do want to take the draft capital they got in the Wilson trade and add a little bit more to it. I mean, obviously Pete Carroll's 7 years old. I don't think he wants to rebuild. And with all the cap they have, I think right now they're number 3 in cap this offseason and number 1 next offseason. Obviously that changes if they do get Watson, but they're still going to be in the top half of the league in cap space available. So I'm saying 1 Steelers, 2 Seahawks, and then 3 Panthers. I know last year, the Panthers were trying to trade for him, but Watson said he didn't want to go there, if I'm not mistaken. But obviously a year has passed, so he could have maybe changed his mind since then. So yeah, I'm saying 1 Pittsburgh, 2 Seahawks, 3 Panthers as my top 3 most likely landing spots for Watson.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you there. Pretty much in that order. Deshaun, I mean, obviously we've seen what he's done. He's put up amazing numbers throughout his time as a Texan, but he wants out because that organization is already in a forward mindset that they're gonna, move on from the quarterback. And I think the Steelers would be a good fit for him. Obviously, you mentioned it, the loss of Big Ben in the offseason due to retirement. Now they need that quarterback position to be filled. I mean, Deshaun Watson, hello. I mean, obviously, Mike Tomlin has always been one of the best coaches in the league, been with that Steelers organization forever. I don't think, and like we said, I'm still trying to remember a time where that team finished under 500. There's just the dominance of the Steelers, and I think Deshaun Watson could be one of the biggest difference makers in that offense. Obviously, since Ben Roethlisberger can't throw the ball more than 20 yards now, and Deshaun Watson has that arm strength, you can find that deep ball for guys like, Washington and Deontay Johnson and those guys in Pittsburgh. Obviously, you mentioned Seattle. Seattle will be an intriguing destination for him. Obviously, the situation in Seattle is a little weird, obviously, because with the front office, don't get me started with the front office, but that front office having a more mindset that they're thinking about the rebuild. But now that Deshaun Watson's available, the Seahawks have been linked to potentially getting him, kind of getting a younger Russell Wilson in a sense, kind of like that, maybe like a 2013, 2014 prime Russell Wilson. So, maybe that'll be interesting. But also, I kind of agree with you there. I don't see why this program would really want to, if their intents to keep Pete, why do a full rebuild with a 70-year-old head coach when you might as well do that with some 30-year-old head coach who's kind of getting his foot under the door, Sean McVay. So that's why I kind of am ruling out Seattle just because who knows what they'll do sometime. I mean, we saw it today with the whole Bobby Wagner situation about how the organization didn't even tell him, and it's just inexcusable from just the front office, Carroll and Schneider. That's just inexcusable. And, this organization is now coming under fire with so many allegations, not just from Russell Wilson, Bobby Wagner, but all these other guys, So Seattle could be intriguing, but at the same time, I don't think he wants to come to this PR nightmare right now. And then you look at the Panthers, and you mentioned that he doesn't want to go there before. He's previously said that he does not want to go there, but a year happens, and you mentioned it. Obviously, that quarterback situation in Carolina is very, very shaky. They brought in Sam Darnold in a trade. That didn't work out. They re-signed Cam. That didn't work out. They still have PJ Walker behind him. That didn't work out. So they need that guy. They've been looking for that guy to replace Cam ever since Cam left, and maybe Deshaun Watson could be that guy. We'll see. That'll be intriguing to see. And then the final thing I want to talk about is the Bears releasing Tariq Cohen. And this was something kind of a surprise to me, but something, kind of remorseful. Obviously, Tariq Cohen's kind of been the background, that background running back for David Montgomery in Chicago ever since Montgomery became a Chicago Bear. And, they've been splitting carries, Tariq Cohen usually being that passing back option. But now with that gone, where do you see David Montgomery's fantasy value potentially increasing? I mean, is it kind of assumed that obviously David Montgomery's going to have a bigger role, or is there going to be a lot more maybe Damien Williams in that backfield? Now with one less running back in that running back room, where do you see David Montgomery's fantasy value going? Is it going up, or is it kind of staying at the same, or just kind of depending on what happens throughout the rest of the free agency period in the offseason?
Well, I think the number 2 right now is Khalil Herbert for the Bears, the rookie last year who looked pretty good when Montgomery missed time. But yeah, I mean, it was kind of weird because we haven't really heard anything about Cohen like the last year, and then up until now, like the last year and a half. But yeah, I think his value hasn't really changed much at all. I think Herbert will still be that kind of change of pace number 2. And then they'll mix in Damien Williams a little bit as well. I assume he's still on the roster, but honestly, I haven't really looked to see if he's a free agent or not. But obviously, they still have Khalil Herbert on the rookie deal. I'm not sure off the top of my head what Montgomery's contract situation is. I don't. If he says he's still on his rookie deal, I'm not completely sure or not. But I think we could see. I don't really see the Bears extending Montgomery. I feel like with what Khalil Herbert showed, that might lead to them sticking with him on his rookie deal, and then letting Montgomery walk in free agency. I don't know. I feel like I want to say he might have one more year left in Chicago on his current deal, but I could be wrong. But yeah, I don't really think that this news really affects Montgomery at all from a fantasy football perspective.
Yeah, you mentioned I forgot about Khalil Herbert, but he was that breakout draft pick for the Bears last offseason when Montgomery went down. But you mentioned it was kind of something that just came out of nowhere, the whole Tariq Cohen being released. But after he came off after he was having a major ACL injury surgery year, kind of surprising to see the Bears just kind of get rid of their passing back just out of the blue. But you mentioned Montgomery's contract. I don't know what it is either. I believe he's still on his rookie deal, if I'm not mistaken. But that could be interesting too. I mean, you mentioned like Khalil Herbert. If he has one of those dominant seasons and kind of overtakes Montgomery, it could lead to Montgomery potentially walking and finding somewhere to be that lead back again. So that'll be interesting. We'll also keep you updated with all the free agency news as free agency does start next Wednesday. That's when the free agency market is officially open for the NFL. So we'll give you the latest updates with all the free agency moves potentially, along with franchise tags and all of that fun stuff next week as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft. And also on Sunday, we may or may not be streaming. We will, if we don't, you'll see us on Monday to kind of give our recaps on what the brackets looked like and kind of, some of our big favorites after the Selection Sunday show. But if not, we will see you guys on Sunday. But if not Sunday, we'll see you guys on Monday for another episode of AKP Sports Talk.